Kavanaugh with the Jeffersonville Police Department. That's Kavanaugh, K-A-V-A-N-A-U-G-H. Our purpose and intentions this afternoon is to deliver an update of information regarding the dangerous and reckless encounter of an individual who was possessing a firearm, publicly displaying that firearm, and then discharging that firearm in the Eastlawn Arms apartment complex located in Jeffersonville at 1501 East 8th Street. The described behavior led to a police officer-involved shooting that actually occurred on yesterday's date. If you see me stepping out from this podium, this is a clear, deliberate action that is taken by me. If I were to pull a firearm out and start pulling the trigger, that's a clear, concise, deliberate action taken by me or any individual that I will use or apply deadly force. The individual involved in this incident clearly took this action yesterday with our police officers being on scene at this location. This was a direct, capable means that was presented by this individual that they were willing to use and apply deadly force, not considering public safety at all whatsoever. The preliminary information received indicates our Jeffersonville police officers acted appropriately within policy and procedure, engaging deadly force. They also applied life-saving aid to the individual after applying deadly force to render that aid to do everything they could to protect the life of that individual. The Jeffersonville Police Department will be conducting an internal investigation to check our policies and procedures that were engaged while the officers took the actions that they did on yesterday's date, encountering this individual who was being dangerous and reckless, discharging this firearm in a public area, but a housing complex which was occupied by persons that were outside and bystanders who were witnesses. Indiana State Police was contacted per the Jeffersonville Police Department policy to assist with the investigation to identify any and all criminal violations that are contrary to the state of Indiana's laws. Also, Mr. Jeremy Mull of the Clark County Prosecutor's Office was also contacted. He was made aware of this information, which unfolded. Therefore, he would be expecting the full review of this incident coming from the Indiana State Police, subsequently leading to any charges by all persons involved. At this time, I'm going to turn this portion of our press release over to Major Isaac Parker. We have presented what we have identified as a detailed factual timeline of what exactly occurred on yesterday's date, encountering this individual that had a firearm and actually was displaying the firearm and was pulling the trigger with our officers there on scene in this apartment complex. Major Parker, if you would come forward, please.
Thank you, Chief. I'm going to present a factual timeline of events which led to the act of criminal recklessness causing an officer-involved shooting. At 6:35 p.m., Central Alarm received a call on the non-emergency administrative line. The caller advised the neighbor is standing outside with a pistol in his hand. The caller believed the suspicious person is paranoid, stating, quote, SWAT was coming for him. At 6:40 p.m., officers arrived on scene and made contact with the complainant. Approximately 2 minutes later, officers requested a dedicated operations channel. At 7:03 p.m., an officer advised dispatch that the subject had an object in his left hand. The officers then identified themselves as police and gave verbal commands for the subject to put the gun down in an attempt to de-escalate the situation. At 7:04 p.m., an officer advised dispatch the subject is shooting the firearm into the air and aiming it at the officers. The subject was discharging the weapon in close proximity of the officers at the scene and in the parking lot of an apartment complex where members of the public reside. The subject then began to advance toward the officer's position with the firearm in his hand and pointing the firearm in the directions of the officers when the officers were forced to engage him. At 7:06 p.m., the officers advised dispatch that shots had been fired and requested an emergent response from EMS. At 7:07 p.m., officers began rendering aid to the subject. Officers initiated a life-saving aid, including the use of a tourniquet and chest seals, before he was transported by EMS to University of Louisville Hospital. At 7:20 p.m., he was en route to University of Louisville Hospital. And at 7:26 p.m., the chief of police contacted the Indiana State Police requesting an investigation. I feel it's important to also cover an additional incident which took place the day prior involving the same individual. On March 8th of 2023 at approximately 8:44 in the morning, the Jeffersonville Police Dispatch received a call regarding suspicious activity. The caller stated a subject is parked in the 2000 block of Allison Lane in front of Faith Lutheran Church under the awning at the front of the door, acting erratic inside of a vehicle. At 9:13 in the morning, the subject was transported by EMS to the Clark Memorial Hospital for a voluntary mental evaluation. Officers made contact with the subject while there, who stated he came to the church for help and requested a mental evaluation. The officer noted the subject was partially clothed and acting abnormal. Officers spoke to the subject for several minutes and assisted him by calling for an ambulance to transport him to Clark Memorial Hospital for a voluntary mental evaluation. This time we will take questions.
Is the subject still alive? Did they die? Do you know if they're still in critical condition?
The subject is still being treated at University Hospital.
How many shots were fired?
There's certain specifics that I can't release at this time because Indiana State Police is conducting that investigation.
Is there body camera video of this, and are we able to get it?
There is body camera video, and that will be made available as soon as possible. Understand that not only is there a criminal investigation that's being ran by the Indiana State Police, but we also have an internal investigation, but we will release that when possible.
Were any of the officers that responded last night responded on March 8th to this individual? Any of the
That information has not been identified, what officers have, but we do know that we had contact. So at this point in time, that's going to come out in the internal investigation, also the criminal side of the investigation as well. We've turned that information all over to Indiana State Police for them to be able to have access, and we'll be looking at it from our internal side as well. To follow back up on your question regarding body camera, me as chief of police, I have not reviewed the body cam information yet as well. So that is still going to be forthcoming in the next couple of days. So it'll be a period of time through the course of both investigations. And then after that information will be documented, submitted in the actual report from Indiana State Police to the Clark County Prosecutor's Office. We'll still work through that, and the information will become publicly available.
Do we know if all the officers were wearing body cams at the time, or were they turned on?
The officers involved did have body cams, and preliminary reports indicate that the body cam was functioning and did document the occurrence of what happened with officers involved in the individual on both occasions.
Do we know where the man was shot, and which location of his body?
Again, that would be a better question for the Indiana State Police.
Do we have the suspect's identity yet?
We do, however, we have not released that yet. Again, that would probably be best to come from the Indiana State Police.
Based upon the side of the investigation and based upon the side of the investigation with the activity and action behavior that occurred, we understand and look at, there has reasonable belief to appear there are some criminal violations that that are present, and it appears so that information will be forthcoming from the Indiana State Police, I would believe so.
How many officers are on administrative leave?
There were 5 total officers that received temporary assignment with unrestricted administrative leave.
How many of those were forced to discharge their weapons?
3 officers were forced to discharge their weapons. Thank you.
And with the officers, 3 officers, were they ever involved in shootings in the past?
Again, there's certain things that are going to be looked into with the internal investigation as well that I will not release.
But that
Today.
the information will be forthcoming upon us identifying the officers and information made available. Yes.
Was this a person who's familiar to people at the apartment complex that lived there? Do we know anything about his background of why he was there holding a gun?
He was familiar with people there, and hence the reason that the caller reached out to us. However, you know, as far as any of the details behind what exactly occurred last night, again, there's certain specifics. Our hands are just tied on. We can't release that information right now. That would need to come from the agency that's conducting the criminal investigation.
But recognize that the information being reported to Jeffersonville Police Department came from within the complex. And there was a deep concern by the actions and the behavior, and clearly that call was just, because when the officers arrived, they witnessed the same, and it became even more a deadly encounter by the actions and the behavior of the individual who was discharging that firearm while police officers were present.
How many other people were around when he was firing those gunshots? I think you said people were in the parking lot at the time.
It's a populated apartment complex, and there were people out present. At the time, we've been able to identify persons and individuals, so it's hard to say with a number, but there were people present. It's a multi-family complex with numerous buildings throughout that borders East A Street, and also borders Nahan Lane.
For a few people that went out there to the scene today, I spoke to a few people. Some of their cars were hit by bullet holes. What do you tell them in terms of, I'm not going to say that the cars were just hit by bullets. Is there any policy in terms of, for them, I was speaking to one person who said, like, he can't afford to fix his car based off this. Do you guys have any policy directed towards that?
Absolutely. Officers, investigators are back on scene within the last 2 to 6 hours here on the date and time. They've identified other pieces and components of information, but if someone's an individual and they're saying that they have damage and that's not been identified, it would be reasonable for them to actually come forward and notify us. So I want to tell you at this point in time, that information has not been made available to us, and we've been in and out of that complex with numerous officers, numerous investigators, and we're waiting for that information. Is there present, you received it, encourage them to come forward.
I may have missed this, but what is the suspect's condition, and what charges will they be facing if they survive?
Part of the Indiana State Police investigating this, they will take over the criminal actions of that individual as well. As far as his status goes, he is still receiving treatment at University Hospital. I believe he is critical.
The charges would be appropriate if you're discharging a firearm in a public area. Again, that would be based upon the direction of the Clark County prosecutor, Mr. Jeremy Law, but discharging a handgun out in public, that's a criminal recklessness charge with the firearm.
And you said that this individual had a criminal history in the past?
I said what I stated was that we had interaction with the individual the day prior.
The day prior, okay. Thank you.
And my last question is, if you can briefly go over the policy with dealing with someone, because on March 8th, you all responded to someone who was clearly having a mental health episode. What is the policy for that when officers do respond?
As you see what exactly happened there, the officer, it's reasonable to believe that the officer got that person some services and got them routed to the Clark Memorial Hospital to be able to be assessed, and that situation there. It's unfortunately the time of the mental health crisis that we have. We're encountering persons and individuals. We're trying to get them in the direction where they need to go. That is a voluntary commitment. That is something that, with the circumstances there at hand, we have some documentation that we send, but at the end of the day, it's voluntary. And as you see, less than 24 hours returning, we're now in this situation where the individual accessed a weapon, drew concern to the residents there who were familiar with the person and individual, and then the individual then is invoking deadly force. And prior to, I think, some of the reporting of the information I'll go ahead and share with you, it's preliminary, but the individual thought that there was a law enforcement or a SWAT team or something, a type of engagement that was pursuing the subject. So that's more information to come out. And again, it's the individual. I think we may have something here going on, but at the end of the day, clear, concise, deliberate actions. When you have a firearm and you start discharging that in public, you start discharging that around, pointing that at police officers, that clearly escalates that situation. There's not many alternatives that we can use to apply. This is not an outcome that we want. We recognize that we have an individual that's affected fighting for their life. We also have police officers that are affected fighting for their life. This is not what we want for our community, but we see this in societal times all over the country, and this affects us to our core. This is going to be a life-changing experience for these officers that are involved in this individual that we want to see that I deliver, we all deliver prayers to. But we have to understand and recognize that when we're in these crises and persons and individuals grab a weapon, grab a firearm or some type of weapon or instrument, and they are taking an aggressive action, there's not many choices that you actually have to be able to defend yourself.
He released himself from the hospital?
That information, again, is not before us, but it's reasonable to assume within a 24-hour period that we're running into the individual, we're having a secondary contact, and he was not remanded or not kept there. I don't know what the outcome of that situation is, and, many times that is actually the appropriate measure. Once we actually start that process, that starts to fall under certain HIPAA guidelines that we're not privy to that information, or it's going to be accessed or returned to the police department.
And how many gunshots did you say that he fired up in the air?
Numerous.
Yeah, numerous.
Do you know what kind of gun that he had?
It was a handgun. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just when can we expect any information about the suspect or?
It'll be forthcoming within the next week. The officers will actually complete the portion of their investigation with the Indiana State Police. We'll be, at that point in time, releasing further information, and then more information will be forthcoming from there.
And when can we expect any body cam footage to be released?
After the interviews of the investigation coming from the officers engaging with Indiana State Police, it will be a chain of events, a series that will start to release that information. Thank you all for coming out. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. I'm sorry? Oh, I thought you were talking to me.
No, they want us live at 4:30. It's like 4:30 comes quick.
Yes, it does. You got 3 minutes.
Yep.
Doing it in the corner, saying this is just wrapped up. All right, well, we